Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I am your host, Deb Philman, and today I have with me, that is loud, sorry. That shouldn't have gone on. My other machine went on. Today I have with me Hals Shurtleff, who is the director of Camp Constitution in New Hampshire. And we will be talking about what that is, what they do there, and also some wonderful homeschooling materials that he is sort of the guardian of an archive of homeschool materials. But before we get started with our conversation, I would like to ask my audience to please like this video, share this video with others who are homeschooling, thinking of homeschooling, or teachers, educators interested in home education and parental rights and American values and all the things that are sort of in crisis at the moment. Please share this out so we can make sure they have the opportunity to ask questions during the broadcast. The replay will be live immediately after we're done, but it's nice if you can ask questions while we're here. Also, consider subscribing to the channel if you want to get updated about more content related to education in America. And then consider joining my locals at thereasonwelearn.locals.com, where you can get support for your homeschooling journey if you are going down that path. So welcome, Hal. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy to meet you and glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
Well, I'm just so excited to hear more about Camp Constitution. So would you, first of all, give us a little background on yourself and then tell us all about the camp?
Sure. Well, born and raised, and up until December of last year, lived in Boston. I served in the United States Army, but I went to public schools or government schools during the height of the forced busing era in Boston in the 70s. Learned a lot of things from that. Spent 3 years in the regular Army, a year in the 101st Airborne, 2 years in a field artillery unit in Germany, and then about 4 or 5 years as a reservist. Married with 5 children, 2 grandchildren. We homeschooled our children from the beginning, just about the beginning. We had them in a Christian school for a year or two. And I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, and I'm the co-founder and director of Camp Constitution, and currently residing in the beautiful Lakes region of New Hampshire, in Alton, New Hampshire. So
very good. All right, should it be .net? I think it should be .net,
it's
right?
.net. Oh, I put.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm fixing it.
Okay. All right.
I'm fixing it and we'll get it up there. All right, great. So tell us about Camp Constitution.
Well, Camp Constitution is a New Hampshire-based charitable trust, and we conceived it in 2008 when we learned that there was a national summer camp program that I was the Northeast director. It was a week-long program, and it was canceled kind of arbitrarily without my knowledge. Okay. So a few of us decided, let's start our own, and that became Camp Constitution. And we started off just by holding week-long family camps. When I say family, it means unaccompanied minors as well as entire families, and that includes little babies or mother-in-laws and father-in-laws too. And we have a lot of unaccompanied adults that come, and we put them to work. But then a friend of mine wanted me to see if I could find this book called "From Farm Boy to Financier." There was a chapter in this book that dealt with the Jekyll Island meeting, and so it was hard to find. After a couple of years, it was listed on Amazon for $1,500, but a friend of mine found it at a yard sale for $1. And we printed that chapter, and that became Camp Constitution Press. So we published, it's not like a huge production, but we've got a number of items that we reprint or published for the first time. We just reprinted the 1928 U.S. Army Manual that I don't think has been in print since 1928. But what's fascinating about that manual is that it has the definition of our country. It says a republic, and it had the true sentiments of our founders when it came to democracy, that said attitudes are communistic, leading to anarchy. And when the Roosevelt came into power, he had all those books destroyed, as many as he could destroyed. So we put that in print, and all these are available on our website and our shop.
So you're sort of like a little Library of Alexandria of the country's history.
Right, exactly. And it's
Wow.
a great history book too. It wasn't designed to teach drill and ceremony, but more American civics and history. We also have a YouTube channel like you do. We have a speakers bureau. We attend various gatherings, homeschool shows, and other places where patriots gather. And we were down in Plymouth, Massachusetts, a couple of weeks ago, where they had a wonderful "For the People, If My People" rally, and there were Indians, Christian Indians. One was a chief, and all of the descendants, Mayflower descendants, which I'm one, the believings, we all went, we prayed together. It was very, very moving. It was a wonderful experience. We also have a learning center in this town of Lexington, Massachusetts. It's a private residence with a large room just a few blocks away from the Lexington Battle Green. So we have events there, and we let other groups use it. And we hold about maybe 35, 40 people. And we encourage homeschool groups. If anyone's watching this in some other part of the country and love to have a history tour, we'll be happy to show you around some of the sites of Greater Boston, especially Lexington and Concord. And what else do we do? I guess we do a few other things on top of that. Oh, we house the Samuel Blumenfeld Archive.
Right.
And if you want, I can discuss Sam
Please
right
tell
now.
me.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
I think it's really important for people to know who Sam was and what he did and what he left us.
and this is, I think, my favorite picture of Sam. These children are probably in their 40s now, but Sam just loved teaching people how to read. Sam was a homeschool pioneer. And if you meet people who homeschooled in the 80s and the 90s, they would have known Sam very well and probably said, it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing this. And so Sam was born in New York City in 1923 or 24, and he learned how to read properly in those days. Those government schools, they did teach you how to read, and they really didn't care what gender you were. They just, all they needed from you was your phone number, your address, and they taught you well. He was a World War II veteran. If people wouldn't meet him, they look at, he was in artillery, and he spent some time in Italy during the war. And he got out, he went to New York University, traveled to Europe, went back to Europe, and he became the editor of Grosset Dunlop, the people who published Hardy Boy and Nancy Drew. And it was then that he learned about America's reading problem. We're talking about the early, like 1960 and 61. A friend of his, a New York lawyer, Washburn was his name. He said, Sam, I'm starting a literacy group, and I want you to be involved. He says, literacy group? Well, why would you need to do that? Reading is so easy. You learn the phonics, the vowels and consonants, and bingo, you're a reader. He said, you got to read Rudolph Fleischer's book, Why Johnny Can't Read, which was published, I think, in 55. So Sam read the book, and it changed his life. In fact, Sam and Rudolph became friends. Rudolph was a socialist from Vienna, Austria, so they didn't do a lot of projects together, but he was an honorable man, and he looked at the look-say method of reading in the United States, and that was the reason why there was children weren't learning anymore through this miserable look-say method. But Sam started researching it, and he went well beyond Rudolph Fleischer's research. Sam he looked at Horace Mann and John Dewey and the schools that they set up, and the compulsory education laws that Horace Mann had started promoted. And Massachusetts was the first state. And of course, some people look at that and say, "What a wonderful thing!" But I think you and I think a little otherwise on that.
Yeah.
And then he ended up he became an editor of the Review of the News, which was a weekly magazine. And then went off on his own, publishing and speaking. And I think his most important work, he wrote about 15 books. His last book was co-authored by Alex Newman. It was called Crimes of the Educators. And it was interesting. Sam was on his deathbed. He died in 15, and he told me 25 years ago that he will do this till he drops. Well, he was literally on his deathbed, autographing his book and selling his book and giving his books away. Alex Newman, who was much younger, in fact, they didn't know each other. They never met in person. So we were able to get Alex up to Boston, and he got the chance to meet Sam. But Sam's, I think, most important work, which is most basic, was Alpha Phonics. Here we go. I get this in the camera. This is
Alpha
just
Phonics.
Alpha Phonics, and it's just a 128 page lessons, I should say. And it starts off with the vowel and it goes on. And we use this. My wife and I use this to teach our children how to read. And when I show it to people, I'll kind of flash it by, and I'll say, "What's missing in here?" And people will say, "No pictures." I said, "That's correct." I said, "Sam said you don't need puppets popping out of trash cans to teach children how to read." He also introduces children to the cursive, and on our site we have a lessons in cursive, and of course that's almost a lost art today. They don't teach cursive, but Sam was initially under the opinion that these educators simply were duped by this look-say method, and if they just got the word that this is another way to teach, that they would all embrace it. Now, the look-say method was introduced in the Boston schools in the 1840s. And a man named, the story, William Gallaudet, who was
Mm-hmm.
who had a school for the deaf and blind. He's the one that devised the look-say method, because if you're deaf, you can't hear sound, so it makes sense. They would be handicapped, but at least they could learn some basic reading. And he just thought, well, we should introduce it. Maybe it will be good for children who could hear. Well, after 2 years, this teacher's a boss said, "Get this out of here. It's not working. I don't
Right.
think you should ever experiment on children." But it didn't work, and it was brought back in the 1930s to the Dick and Jane readers. Those stupid. And I remember I was a second grader, and I had trouble with the look-say. And the teacher told my mother that you should teach him at home. And my mother was born in 1920. That's all she knew was phonics. So I became, within a short time, became a pretty proficient reader. So Sam, anyway, he would travel the homeschool circuits, and initially he was pioneering starting up private schools, which is still a good idea, by the way. He was involved in the creation of the South Boston Academy and Hyde Park Academy and other schools in other parts of the
Hmm.
country. And he authored, I guess, about 15 books. His one of his most important books was the NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education,
Oh, isn't that
and
the truth?
where you get the history of the NEA and the history of what happened. And
Right.
Sam concluded that we were deliberately dumbed down.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I don't think he coined the term. He did coin the term menticide. That's the destruction of a brain, the deliberate destruction of a child's brain,
Yep.
menticide.
Yep.
And so he was one of, I met him back in 1988 at a gathering. We were good friends, and I would sponsor speaking engagements for him. And when we started Camp Constitution, he was an instructor. And when he passed, I inherited his books, most of his books and his papers and recordings. And I had about 200 legal sized boxes that I had to go through. And Sam was very organized, but he had to move out to hit a downsize, and some of the stuff he just kind of crammed in. So, along with some of these incredible letters and correspondence and articles he wrote back in the 60s and 70s, were phone bills and his mother's wedding ring and all kinds of things like
Oh my
that.
goodness.
Yeah, which I gave to his niece. So Sam was a single man. He never married, didn't have any children. And I told Sam while on his deathbed that we are going to make sure your legacy, your important work will live on long after you passed away, generations. And there's
Right.
probably, I'm sure, some homeschoolers out there that have used, since he died, are using his alpha phonics on their children, because he died in 15. So
It's
I'm
still
sure
out on
there's a few.
Amazon. I put the link
And
up there.
oh
Yep.
yeah, we just put this one was the one that we that Sam copyrighted.
Hmm.
And so we just put this back in print, this particular edition. They're all pretty much the same, but just different editions.
Right.
He also put something called Phonics for Success, which is another thing that we have the copyright. It's a
Okay.
smaller it's the same as this, but it's just designed to be. It was really designed for adults. I don't have a copy in my hands, but that was. He used to be involved with an inner city reading program called "We Are All in This Together." The Wait House. We are all in this together. So he would teach adults who were functionally illiterate as well, and there's a lot of
Gosh,
adults. And
too
there
many.
was there were college people with college degrees that were functionally illiterate. And he would
Mhm.
start off, this is, Newt Rockney would say, this is a football. Let's get to the basics. And he'd say, look, forget about you. You need to have a phonetic reflex because you have a whole language reflex. So what he would do is he would start off with the A, just the way he would teach children. And the parents picked it up pretty well. And what's fascinating with our online archive, it's all free. If you go to our website, you'll see the drop down, and all we look for is an email address and a username. We do accept donations, but it's free, and we just thought that would be the best way to do it.
Mhm.
And last year we got about 2 million views, and that doesn't mean 2 million people. It could be 10,000, but we're excited that it's going international, of course, and the royal family of the Kingdom of Bahrain. I said, where in the world is? I thought it was it's north of China. They use our alpha phonics. A teacher in Johannesburg, South Africa, got a hold of us 2 years ago and said that she inherited a special needs class. They used a different term. 19 students. She said in 2 weeks, they did not, in 2 years, there was no progress. She said she found this online and she started using it. Within 2 weeks, they all but two became proficient readers. and she would just download this thing is completely downloadable in a PDF, or you can just go to the website and you could have the lessons in audio and video. So Sam would, have the pages out. And then earlier this year, I got an email from a gentleman in Zimbabwe, Harare, Zimbabwe. He started, Zimbabwe, I think it's pronounced. It used to be
Yeah.
Rhodesia. That's what I call it, Rhodesia.
Right. Right.
And he started a Christian school out of his home. And so this is a dirt poor country, communist run. And then it grew to about 300 plus students.
Mm-hmm.
And he found this on the internet, and he asked if we would donate some. So I said, yeah. I said, I hope it gets there. So we did donate some, and I told him I wanted some videos of the children learning, and they call it the Blumenfeld approach. That's the term they use. And so we got videos on our YouTube channel of these delightful little children, very well dressed, dirt poor school, nothing on the walls. The desks are just bare bones. And the teachers are well dressed. The men are wearing ties or shirts, and the ladies are properly attired. No neck tattoos and any of that nonsense. And so we sent them a batch. We also put them in touch with a ministry in Cape Town, South Africa. So they're connecting. So we're really excited that we're able to reach out. And we invited him. His name is God knows is his first name. I can't pronounce his last name. It's got 20 vowels in it. Even though I'm a phonetic reader, too many
There's a limit.
for me.
It's like Welsh. Welsh confounds me. I can't. I'm like, what does that say? They have no vowels.
So we invited him into this. We hope he can come here next year to attend some homeschool shows with us and get the word out. So you see, he accepts this Alpha Phonics, and he's introducing it to public schools in his country, and they're accepting it. Something that will not be accepted in our government schools today. In fact, Sam would write letters to mayors of Newark, all these cities that are having horrible schools, and he would say, "Give me your worst school, and I will turn it around in 1 year." And I think we have some of the letters on the archive, and some of the responses. Usually, no response, or thank you, but no thank you. And that's when he realized that they are not interested in good education. They do not. These educators do not. And that's what frustrates me. I'm glad to see parents finally speaking out to the extent they are. But why did it take them so long? When the kids came home and said, "Daddy, Mommy, you're fascist because you don't recycle, and the world's coming to an end in 8 years because of climate change." Or when they say, we go to church and they say that we were created by God, but we evolved from monkeys and slime, Mommy and Daddy. Or they come back and say, "Well, I don't celebrate July 4th, Independence Day. We're an evil country. We're a horrible country. We're evil. We deserve." They should have spoken up way back then. And it took this critical race theory. And my view is this: if these teachers are willing to teach something so destructive, why would I want them even near my children?
That's kind of how I feel. It's what I say all the time. Like, and even if you got rid of that, it's another thing I say on this channel, that as bad as it is, and I'm actually very frustrated that I had to talk about it so much this year, because the academics are so bad, and they've been so bad for so long. Remember, I went to graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania in 1989, 1990. I graduated in 90. And they made us read Paulo Freire in that program. And then when they taught us whole word and whole language, and the whole time I'm in grad school going, what? So I go in to teach in the school, and I was out of there inside of 2 years, because I said, I can't do this. And what things they were asking me to do, it just felt like it was so wrong. And so I saw it then. And of course, now I've read so much more, read John Taylor Gatto and so forth. And I know, Marva Collins, it's been going on for a very long time. And so the only conclusion I've come to is that the parents of today were the students of yesterday in the same institutions. That's right. So they are, when you're trying to parent, and you have two things going against you. All of the educators and press and the politicians and the culture itself lionizes teachers like they're heroes, like right up there with firefighters, military, and police. Okay. Oh my God, they're giving their lives to this. And all of the dialogue is around that you're not the expert, the teachers, the educators, the system, and you don't know any better because of course you were educated in the same system. So you now have the first generation of parents who really, not all of them obviously, but who just don't even have the wherewithal to question it. And then the ones who do have the wherewithal to question it are so busy working and paying the taxes
right.
and so forth for the rest of the system that they only had to look at it during the pandemic. And then what did they see? Critical theory, right? So,
That's right.
I've been sitting there saying your kids can't read. And I know there are a lot of others. On Twitter, there are Moms for FAPE and all kinds of other mom groups and literacy groups and people who've been fighting and fighting and fighting for decades to address this literacy problem, and have, they've made inroads, and they've certainly rescued certain segments of
Right.
the illiterate population, but it has done nothing to reform the system. They are still using 3Q, and the only people who've actually made a dent that I have seen inside the classroom at a statewide level are the teachers of Mississippi, of all
Oh, really?
places.
Yeah. Interesting.
They
Yeah.
were sneaking off and doing phonics, and
Wow.
their legislators started to notice, or they started also going to the legislators, and they said, look at what our results are versus the results of the people who are not doing this. And
Hmm.
they now, last year, I believe it was, they passed a law that you must use the science of reading to teach reading. It's
That's
not
good.
optional anymore. So
Yep.
that's good news in Mississippi, which has traditionally had some of the worst schools in the country. So,
I would say
there,
not for long.
if they
It'll
keep
be,
up with this,
yeah.
they'll set an example. But it is such a huge problem, and I think that's by way of explaining. And I know I sometimes get defensive of parents, but I was one who was involuntarily forced to put my kids in school because they were homeschooling, and then I was divorced, and I had
Mhm.
no choice. I was ordered basically to keep them in public school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you know better and you're forced to do that, you then become intimately acquainted with all the things that are wrong, but you
Hmm.
also start to see the other side as a parent, because there you are, the involved parent. I know better. I'm a homeschooler forced to put my kids
Right.
in school. And you
Right.
start banging down those doors only to realize that you're putting your child more at risk because they retaliate against you and your child. You are making yourself unemployable because word travels fast and people don't want to work with you because you're a problem person. And this whole
Hmm.
domestic terrorist thing, that's new to most parents. I've been in that category
Right.
since my kids had to start public school. So most people, and this is not a dig, this is just an observation. Most people are cowards. And I just mean, just observationally, they just want to live their lives and not be too bothered and not stick their necks out, not worry about losing their
Path of
job.
least resistance. Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah.
They're not bad people. They just don't. It's a tall ask. It's a bridge too far for them. So I think it's more about that than that they think it's good enough. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? I think they either don't know or just don't know quite how to attack it and make any inroads. But now they are learning. They're learning and they're teaching themselves, and they have motivation because they were stuck at home with these kids shoulder surfing and seeing what was going on and absolutely horrified.
There's a funny meme that I saw earlier this year when some of the schools are reopening, and it has a classroom, and the teacher asked, "So, what did you learn when you were at home?" And one kid said, "We're a republic, not a democracy." Another kid said, "Climate change is a hoax." Third kid said, "Trump won," and the fourth kid said, "Michelle Obama's a man."
Oh my God. You see, those are the stories that make them say, this is why you can't educate your own. That is very funny. I want to take some of these comments quickly before they go by too far. First of all, somebody at JJ asks, this is, hi Deb and Hal, great video, thanks. Hal, did you see how Boston Latin has been severely harmed in the past 18 months? I shouldn't be surprised, but it had survived since 1635.
Yeah, I think they did away with the test, didn't they? I think
I
so.
think they did, but even prior to that, I will tell you that in 2000, no, sorry, 2000, the year 2000, I was tutoring students from Boston Latin because I was living in
Really?
Charlestown. Yeah. And so I was working part-time as a private tutor for parents in the Charlestown area, and they had kids at Boston Latin, and they thought that they were so lucky to have their kids at Boston Latin. And I
Mm.
was tutoring history and English grammar to middle school children, and they were minimum 2 years behind where they ought to have been. And these were upper middle class families. These were
Yeah.
not poor families at all. And, they were paying me to be a private tutor. And I was absolutely shocked when I communicated with one of the English teachers, and her email back to me was illiterate. It was grammatically incorrect.
Amazing.
And
I
then
took the
there was my
test.
answer.
I think I was in the 5th grade or 6th grade when they took the test to get into Boston Latin. I mainly did it because when the test was over, you had the rest of the day off. So you had to go into the school itself,
Exactly.
get on the bus, and I didn't pass. I didn't fail it by much. I really didn't want to go. I didn't want to have to get on a bus and to get on the trolley to get to the school every day. But I just
Right.
did it for it just I was encouraged to take it, and I my feelings weren't hurt. You have to have a certain level, and I was a pretty good
Yeah.
student. But when I was in junior high, it was mostly all A's, honor roll. I didn't join the honor society because that was for nerds, which I probably should have. But in those
Yeah.
days, that's what I did. Um, but yeah, I mean, today, it's when they had the test, it was mostly Asians, and
Yep.
see, Asians do very well at these schools. In fact, Harvard University capped the number of Asians that they will have in their school. And I thought, yeah, talk about they're talking about Asian hate. Well, that to me is not exactly. If you qualify, you have the money, or you have the academic abilities, that's where you should be. Today
Right.
we don't have that. It's this equity nonsense where
Right.
people with different will have the same outcome no matter how much you put into something.
Exactly. And then this is from Jay, who says, Deb, thank you for your work in education. Have you seen the latest figures on how many are homeschooling in the US after the September, or how many are homeschooling in the US after September, October enrollment deadlines? I cannot find anything that recent in my searching. It might take a little digging because they are always behind. When they aggregate the data, they
Yeah.
have to, disaggregate, aggregate again. It sometimes can take up to a year, tragically. But I know there are people
Well,
out there working on it. Have you seen anything?
I'm hearing that it's double. What was it, about 3 or 4%?
Well, I know it's over 10% now. I thought it was
Yeah,
even as high as 14, but I
yeah.
could be wrong. I know it's about that much of the Black community. It's definitely in the double digits in the Black community, without a doubt.
I was at an event in Wakefield, Massachusetts, 2 nights ago. It was a new group just formed, ROAR, Restore Our something Republic. I forget what the A stood for. And there was a lady that came up, and she had two other ladies with her. They just started their own little homeschool group, and she was suburban. I think it was, what town was she was in? I forget what town, but it was suburban Boston. And then she
Right.
just had enough, and they're just having a delightful time. And I approached her. She said she's not connected to any homeschool groups, any like there's a group called Mass Hope, which is a Christian-based homeschool group and organization in Massachusetts. They have an annual convention. So I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of these people are sort of under the radar too. She did tell the school that she was homeschooling,
Right.
so maybe when they come out their stats and in some states and some towns, the laws are different in some, obviously, but there are some towns that just laissez-faire. Boston, believe it or not, we had no trouble homeschooling in Boston. This city never bothered us one at all.
Yep.
Uh, but if we moved to a town maybe out on the outskirts of Boston where they have more busybodies, they probably would have been on our door, knocking on
Right.
our door looking for our curriculum, which we never had to worry about.
I can
So
tell you in North Carolina that our growth in, let's see, it says North Carolina homeschools grow almost 19%
that's
just in
wonderful.
our state. And what I have been told is that, and if I look at the graph, it's like way up. What I've been told is that if we totaled up all the homeschoolers in North Carolina, we are the largest district in the state. So in other
That's great.
words, if you add Wake County to Mecklenburg County, which are the two largest districts, the number of homeschoolers eclipses them.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So,
So that's why I think it's so important for our message to get out because we have this great resource and you know, especially for young parents who are just starting off and they need, well, how am I going to teach my children? Well, you have this free resource right on our website. We have, and there's so many homeschool groups out there today,
yep,
homeschool conventions. And, back in the 80s when it was, or even 70s, when only people who homeschooled were either people who lived on lighthouses, or people who were sort of survivalist, but now it's very mainstream.
very
And
much so.
we started telling people we homeschool, you get funny looks, or what. And I used to love this. What grade are your children in? What grade are they in? And so we didn't really, we did have fully accredited programs. We used a Becca. Becca can be very intense, too many
Yeah.
books. So we were eclectic. We used something different. We used Matthew C. And then we used, and I used to travel. I still travel, but I used to travel around the Northeast and the Midwest and the South. And at the time, my wife worked for the airlines, and the whole country's a classroom. So
Right.
any chance I could take my children, either my son or my girls, We would go to historical, museums, state
Right.
houses, and even minor league baseball games here once in a while. I took them as far as Utah, Idaho, Minnesota, California a couple of times, and it was just a great experience for them.
Well,
And
I keep trying to tell people, and I know Brad Thompson has said the same thing, that it's not homeschooling, it's parenting full time. It's
yes,
just
that's right,
what you're basically doing is you are the one shepherding your child through childhood to adulthood. You and your family and the other adults that you have hand selected, because you will choose tutors and teachers and coaches and different people to come into their lives and family members and so on. But it is a much more organic, holistic, family centered approach to education, and it doesn't see education as something that happens in a specific place. So I don't really
right,
like the term homeschooling, because first of all, it puts school still as the paradigm. School
right,
is the center of the universe, and you're just like a satellite floating around that, when it's really not. Family is the center, and education is, as you point out, everywhere. Your classroom is life.
that's
And
right,
so your children are not sort of living, they're not experiencing childhood from within a building or a group of buildings for 13 years. They're living in the world. So whenever somebody says, what about socialization? I'm like, what about it? My kids
right,
are going to be around people of all ages and all walks of life, and they're going to leave the house and go to the grocery store and go to the park and go here and go there. And they're going to encounter real people doing real things in the real world, even just to observe. If you're outside and you're walking around and you see people working on a construction crew, or you see the police officers, or you see something happening, you go to the store, you see people stocking the shelves, you as a child have more understanding of like how things happen, like how does the food get to the store, how do the
that's
roads
right.
get built, how do the buildings happen, and you begin to have questions, and your curiosity is piqued, which of course enhances learning and so forth. So to me, socialization is not separate from education. I think the question they're really asking is, are my kids going to be weird with other children and or not have any friends, which is a completely separate question, and it reinforces the notion that school is the center of the community and
Hmm.
not the family, or not a group of families, or not the church, or not some other individually chosen association of humans that you want to impart values, through and with and so forth. So you're going to get the values of the state. Whatever the state values are,
Exactly.
that's what you're getting, because you've made them the center of your child's childhood.
The
Wait,
government school. It's interesting. The whole family's calendar is around the government schools. So you take your vacation when there's a spring break or when there's a winter break. You have to make sure someone has to be home when the children come home or pick them up. So everything is revolved around that government school.
everything.
Homeschooling, you do not need to spend 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day reading a book. In fact, most of it's institutionalization.
Yep.
So most homeschoolers can get the stuff done 2.5 hours and go to a park or a museum, or teach the children some skills, or go out there and shovel the snow. And the socialization, that seems to be the biggest issue the people have with it. I'd say, you got to be serious. I said, in my experiences, when I meet people, young people, I can almost discover that they're from a government school. By the way, they're very reluctant to. They don't look you in the eye. If they do shake your hand, it's a wet fish handshake. Most of these children are, it's what the Carnegie minutes. You're in the sixth grade, you don't talk to fifth graders, and you don't talk to seventh graders. And that's how it is. So you're really
Right.
stuck in that little group. I was blessed because my dad had a drugstore and I worked there since I was 8. And I would relate better with adults. My children, all my girls danced. I mean, since they were little, and they became leaders. They became dance instructors. The volunteer instructors. We had a youth group in our church. My son was a leader. He's now one of our counselors at our camp.
Right.
He never had trouble talking. But when he was 10 years old, he was a pretty precocious guy, and he would ask questions, and people would say, "How old is your son?" I say, "He's 10." I said, he's an intelligent guy, but because the way we teach him, that's why he
Yeah.
can relate to adults. And most
Right.
adults are amazed when you homeschool, huh? And of course, some people think every homeschooler is a genius, and no, they're not genius. Some of them are, It's just that this is the way they should be if they were getting the proper education. They'd be all good spellers, or most of them. They'd be
Right.
good readers. They would have a knowledge of history. They would know who George Washington was. They would know who the United States fought World War II. They would,
Mhm.
you ask people if Hitler was a good guy or bad. Oh, I think we were allies with you, weren't we? They have no idea.
No, they
You know?
don't know who fought in which war, or if you mention, it's like they also think that we went from the Civil War to like the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah,
They
they
don't
really think it's
understand there
the
was
same thing.
anything
Yeah,
in between, and they might know World War II maybe kind of because they've been told how bad it was to drop a bomb on the Japanese, but
yeah.
they don't, and they kind of have a vague notion Hitler's bad because he's what, like Trump. I mean, they only know in relation. They only know these names or
Yeah,
terms in relation to some discrete talking point they've
yeah.
heard, but they don't really understand the context. And one of my complaints has been that, when people say, well, don't you want the children to know about the dark history of America? And I'm like, of course I do, when it's age appropriate and when they have context, when they
Right.
understand, when they can have a prayer of understanding the dark side with the good side, with what came before, with what came after. Because,
That's
it's
right.
very interesting. You start to see things, even slavery, as horrific as it is. And I mean, please, nobody hear me saying that there's any, softer side, okay? But in terms of deciding if the people who lived at the time were all evil, horrible monsters, okay? You do need to understand what else was going on in the world, how endemic slavery has been to the human condition since time immemorial,
Since the
how,
fall of man, yes.
right? Like, I mean, it's not this brand new thing that people invented here. And in fact, by the way, it was only about 3% of the total slave trade that found their way to American, colonial shores. So they don't know any of that. They're taught that we sort of magically invented it. We invented it to create capitalism for some reason, and those two things are inextricably linked, which is a lie. And then they start teaching these kids all kinds of things that make it seem. Then it's easy to go from there to George Washington was evil or Thomas Jefferson was evil. But if you knew all those other things, you would say, well, you know what? Thomas Jefferson was a man of his age, and he was neither, evil nor a saint. He was a human being living at the time he lived. And judging by his writings, it sounds like he fought mightily against what was going on at the time, but there were limitations to him too.
Like Washington and Jefferson set the stage for the eventual
Of
abolition of slavery.
course.
But
Of
I'm
course.
living in Massachusetts is one of the first states to abolish it, in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, and so there were a lot of free blacks at the time, and yes, prejudices. But you look at any culture, you go to today, you go to India, and they have a caste system. It's been officially abolished. I had a
Mhm.
friend that spent time in Japan, about 10 years in Japan. He was treated very badly. They wouldn't rent to him at some places, and he spoke the language, and he would always hear them. They thought it was this big ugly American, and he can't understand it. He would challenge them all the time in their language. So this we are the least racist country, and we did
Mhm.
more, I think, to abolish slavery. And there were more anti-slavery societies in the southern states where there's more slaves.
Right.
And it's interesting too because there's a term, it's a French term, and I can't remember it, but it means you can't judge people that lived many years ago by today's standards.
Mhm.
I like to think 100 years from now they're going to say, "What? These folks believed that there was 50 genders and they were okay with killing babies? I can't believe that. They must have, that's all they lived to be is to kill babies and have 50 genders, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll see I won't be
And it's
around. You won't be
probably not
around.
very moral to like do this to children and say go to school and
Yes.
learn to
Yeah.
read and learn to talk and learn to, and how about socializing? Cover
Yeah.
half of your expressive face.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So,
You know,
and,
don't be
but
ableist. Don't be ableist, right? But you, the child who might be hard of hearing, or the adult who's hard of hearing, or have an auditory processing problem, let's cover your mouth so you can't
that's
talk
right.
or
Yeah.
hear properly. It is
Yeah.
absolutely crazy.
I'd like to recommend a book and a potential guest for you is Mary Graybar. She
Oh,
wrote,
oh, oh,
she's one of our instructors. Oh, oh, great. Has she been on your show?
no, not no. But see, where a locals member of mine and friend sent me these yesterday. I just got them yesterday in a
Oh,
box,
wonderful.
and I'm going to start with this book on with my locals community. I'm going to start a book club, and this is going to be the first book. And the reason
Excellent.
I'm choosing this book as the first book is I have referred a few times to something called the Zinification of America, because
Yes.
this man, as much as Horace Mann and Don Dewey, but this man in particular is the reason, the villain, the arch villain who has turned so many Americans. Even I grew up in the 70s and early 80s. I graduated in 83 from high school. And I did go to prep school for 3 years in Massachusetts. I was out in East Hampton at a prep
Okay.
school there. But I was in public school from fourth grade through ninth. And I wasn't taught this garbage, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't taught this.
I call him the patron demon of Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
He's
Yeah.
well, he was a literal communist, and he set out intentionally to reframe American history through that lens, even if it meant storytelling.
That's
Even
right.
if it meant, I mean, he really made no bones about it. And so I'm really eager to read what I read a segment of it. I think they published maybe in a review. They did a review maybe in the Wall Street Journal or some other publication at one point. And I remember thinking at the time, I've got to read this book because I have been anti-Zen for so long. And
I'll send you a link to her. I'll send you like an introductory email, but she'd make a great guest.
Oh
And if
yeah,
you
that would be wonderful.
if your viewers would like to see her presentation, she was at our camp this past July, and she did two presentations. So you go to our YouTube channel, Camp Constitution, you can find, and you're welcome to download it and put it on yours if you want. You're welcome to do
Okay.
that.
Well,
She
I'll
also
definitely share
spoke
it for
about
sure.
what got me connected with her is there was a gentleman by the name of George Schuyler, and George Schuyler was a black patriot, brilliant writer. He he was a he was one of the first. He's not too well known, unfortunately. He debated Malcolm X, and I finally found that it was a radio interview where he set Malcolm X straight. He said it was the Muslims that introduced slavery to sub-Saharan Africa. Malcolm X did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she's writing a biography of him, and that's what got me to her back about 5 or 6 years ago. I have a portrait of him, and I wanted to donate it to. So I was sitting, in my house, but I wanted to make maybe somebody could really appreciate it, some library or someplace.
Yeah.
And now that portrait's hanging in the Lane house where it belongs. When people learn about this great man. So I sent her every article he wrote in the American Opinion magazine, the now defunct magazine. He wrote a monthly article and all PDF files, and then I gave her a copy just recently. She was at our Lane Center, Learning Center on Columbus Day, where we celebrate. And I had a magazine of his portrait, so I gave her a copy of that. She was happy, but she very happy to get it. But yeah, she'll be a great guest to have.
Oh, I would love to meet her. Now, I don't want to let this whole talk go by without talking about your upcoming Supreme Court case. I don't think
Yes.
the audience does not know. Why don't you explain to us the core of the case, and if you can help me out, because even as I read the article about it that you shared with me, it was a little unclear as to what the impetus for putting the flag up was in the first place.
Sure.
And then, what they told you when they said you can't. And so, I mean, I know what they told you when they said you couldn't, but what was the goal?
Well,
What
do
were
we
you
have how
setting
much
out?
time we have left? Oh, we got.
Oh,
Yeah,
we got
yeah,
time.
okay.
We're fine.
I want. Yeah, well, so it was about 8 years ago. Well, City of Boston has what I call a public access flagpole, where civic organizations can have a ceremony, raise a flag, and whatever they do. I first became aware of it as a longtime citizen of Boston when I was crossing the street from the courthouse. I had just been dismissed from jury duty, and they were raising the communist Chinese flag. I couldn't believe it. So this
I'm
was like
sorry, what?
2008. The flag of communist China. They were celebrating the communist Chinese revolution. I said, "This is surreal." So from then on, I become friends with the Falun Gong people and other anti-free Hong Kong groups, and we would have little protest during this ceremony. And then I decided, let's raise the Gadsden flag. And that was about 8 years ago. We raised the Gadsden, that's this flag with the Don't Tread on Me rattlesnake.
Right. Yeah.
And we had no trouble. We got the permit without any problems. We even brought in Garrett Lear, the Patriot pastor, the late Garrett Lear, all 6'7" of him, 6'7", 6 feet 7 inches of him in his colonial clergy attire, in his musket, walking through downtown Boston. It was a great day.
It's awesome.
But there was I was invited to a prayer meeting in June of 17 in the mayor's office. Now, the mayor had nothing to do with it. It was an inner city pastor, Bruce Wall. And I saw blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians all praying. We're told to pray for our leaders. We don't have to agree with them, but we pray for peace and all this. And I thought Christians in the city need to be more vocal, the true Christians, not the ones, I call the apostate churches, which make up a lot of Boston, unfortunately. So I wanted to fly the Christian flag, and you can see it in the background. It's a very simple little flag, and some denominations have their own flags. The Catholic Church has what they call the Vatican flag, which, by the way, did fly on Boston Common when Pope John Paul visited in 1979. Um, so the goal was to fly the flag, have a ceremony. We were going to have our camp chaplain, Reverend Stevie Kraft, give a little present, the need for Christians to be involved in racial harmony. I think racial reconciliation really isn't the right word. Racial harmony is the right word. The second speaker was going to be a gentleman from the South Sudan, Pastor William Levy, who now is a U.S. citizen, and he was going to talk about the blessings of liberty. We weren't going to talk about this problem in South Sudan, but the blessings of liberty he's enjoyed as a citizen. And we had a local historian, Richard Howell. Well, this guy's a walking history book, and he was going to talk about Boston's rich Christian history. And the city of Boston was founded, it was right on Constitution Day, September 17th. So we were going to talk about Boston's history because Boston was founded about that same time in 1630. And from John Governor Winthrop, who gave this sermon on the Arbella before he set sail to Boston, that we were a city set on a hill. That's because of biblical reference. To the visit of Pope John II, until the Park Street Church that sent missionaries all over the world on the whaling ships to they sent them to Hawaii, where they Christianized Hawaii. So there's some great rich history. And if you walk through downtown Boston, you go on the Boston Common and the Boston Public Garden, you're going to see religious Christian symbolism everywhere. And so I called up the lady in charge of the permitting and I told her what we wanted to do. And she said, okay, no problem. I told her we were going to fly the Christian flag. Well, to make a long story short, I got the official no in an email, and it said it was a separation of church and state. That's why, because it's the Christian flag. And so I sent out a news release to the local media. Not one of them picked up on it, but a friend of mine got the email and she said, get a hold of Liberty Counsel. So, which I did that same night. And the next morning, I get a call from Roger Mast, who is in charge of looking at the different cases that come up. He said, we want to take this case. He said, we can win it. It's going to set a precedent, and we like your organization. So those are the three criteria. They sent out a demand letter and made news. It made all the front page of the Boston Herald. It made news on most of the online, so left and right. And that they never answered the demand letter. And then we filed a suit the following July, which made a lot of media coverage. And then we lost in the lower court. We lost at the First Court of Appeals. And so it went on to the U.S. Supreme Court. And September 30th of this year, they decided to hear the case. So they're going to take the case. They'll probably have argument sometime in the spring, and we expect a decision by the end of June. And we hope in time to, and we think we're going to win the case. If we don't win the case, we don't win it. But I think if we don't win it, we just demonstrated that the city of Boston has a strong bias towards Christians. On the other hand, support communist regimes.
Right.
The Chinese Progressive Association of Boston was the official sponsor, and they've been raising the flag for the last 10 or 12 years. But what makes it worse is that city officials participate in their ceremony, and state elected officials. One of them
if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and they're celebrating the communist revolution that took how many lives, and they gave us the virus and all kinds of other things. And Ayanna Pressley was one of the ladies that was there about when she was a city councilor praising the communist revolution. I took the video of that, but I don't know what I did with the footage. I really wanted to have it because my friend there, Trevor from New Zealand, wanted that really badly. And I said, you know what? I can't find, I don't know. I did some of the videos we did of those flag raisings are on a YouTube channel with commentary from me and others. But that one I couldn't find, unfortunately. The last one I attended was in 19, and you had a city councilor, Flynn. That was Ray Flynn's son. Ray Flynn was the nominally conservative mayor, and his son was a 20-year Navy veteran. Here he is praising the Chinese communists. So, but they won't even talk. It would give me a time of day when it comes to the Christian flag. So, again, I want to just praise, and I do recommend your viewers go to Liberty Channel's, Liberty Council's website. In fact, the founder, Matt Staver, just interviewed me last week. I don't think it's aired yet on the subject. And they do a great job. And they're not a big organization, but they're very optimistic that this case will be won in our favor. And the city told us that if we do win, they're probably going to discontinue the flag raising ceremonies. And I thought,
Wow.
it's like the spoiled little brat who it's my football and I can't get in the game. I can't do it my way. I'm going to take the football. And I guess that's their prerogative. But I look at it, if that happens, again, we still make a stronger case about the city. But also, it's like in hockey when professional hockey, when you tie, you get 1 point. You don't
Yep.
lose, but you don't win either. You don't get a full
Right.
victory, but it would be a partial victory because it just shows you how hostile. In the city of Boston, and what's ironic is if you look at the city seal or on its flag, the official flag, there's a Bible verse from the Old Testament. It's in
Mhm.
Latin, so most people can't. I can read a few words here and there. It's from First Kings. It says, "May God favor us as He favored our forefathers." And so here they are telling me that it's separation of church and state. Meanwhile, they get a Bible verse on their flag. And all this flag is, it's a very simple flag. It has what makes it Christian is the red cross, called the Latin cross. And what's fascinating too
Unbelievable.
is that this flag was designed in Coney Island. Sunday school teacher in Coney Island. So I tell people, yeah, a few good things I can. You got the Nathan's famous hot dogs, you got the cyclone, and you got the Christian flag. Three great things that come out of Coney Island. Yeah.
It's just I hope you win because as you say, it's sort of a win either way because it will highlight the hypocrisy of of the city of Boston, but also increasingly just of the left in general. I mean, Boston just elected, Virginia just elects
I know. Yeah.
the first, so she's black, she's an immigrant, and she's a Marine. Okay, it's a lieutenant governor.
And she's a
And
pistol packing mama with that
oh,
with that
she's
AR. I love it.
awesome.
I love it.
She's awesome. Okay,
And by
so
the way,
the
we love powerful women, powerful patriotic women.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, anyone who says otherwise, they're like, oh, those people on the right or whatever. And I'm like, do you know any libertarians or people on the right? Because they don't like
yeah,
wimpy little people, period. But
yeah,
anyway, so there she is giving her amazing speech, such a compelling story she has, and the story of her father and everything. And the CNN people are talking right over her. MSNBC people don't even cover it.
right.
And then what do they do? So this is not worthy of celebration, but we see all, the first, female Asian mayor of Boston, and they do this whole big thing about the new mayor of Boston who's practically a communist. And it's okay
Yeah,
to talk about her, and it's fine. And it's very important that she's female, and it's very important that she's Asian, and it's very important that she, whatever, whatever. But the lieutenant governor, no, we don't need to be hearing about that. In fact, worse than that, that's proof that white supremacy ruled the day. And I'm like, because she's
that's
not a
amazing.
communist.
Well, in Boston, only 28% of the registered voters went out. So the people of Boston weren't too excited. The lefties were more excited about around the country than they were. What happened was Marty Walsh, who was bad news. He's the one that officially denied us the flag raising. I actually personally know him, not very well. When he was a nominally conservative state rep, he was pro-life, pro-psych, and then he completely flipped. He became mayor, totally flipped. It's like he just was on some kind of rotisserie, just turned right around 100%, 180% from being nominally conservative to being a far leftist. So, which means to tell me he really didn't have those conservative values at all.
No, and there've
Anyway,
been quite a few people like that lately. I've
oh
noticed.
yeah, oh yeah. He was appointed under Biden to dismantle it. To what he made, he didn't. Boston was. It's amazing that Boston isn't as bad as Detroit and some of these other cities with the crazy people running. Because you used to have conservative Democrats
Yeah,
that were in the city council. That generation's passed. Not to say there aren't any, but their children went to these government schools and they went to the liberal Catholic schools and they came out as socialists and
yeah,
anti-Americans. But yeah, Michelle is hard left, and she didn't get the support of the black community either. They have no, and she's a big friend of Ayanna Pressley, of course, endorsed by all those crazy people. So I'm really very glad that we moved out of Boston. But the person she ran against wasn't much better, and the former police chief William Gross was thinking about running for mayor. He was a black gentleman, and he would have, I think, been a great mayor. Uh, but the people are stuck with him, and I guess it's going to have to be like Detroit. And so we're so glad we sold our house and got out of there when we
yeah.
did.
I was
But
just there back in the beginning of October. I went to a conference, and I hadn't been back since. Let's see, when's the last time I was in Boston? I probably hadn't been back in about 5 years, and I only
yeah,
went that one time around, like in the wintertime around Christmas. And even in just that short span of time, and it always was kind of going like this. But
Yeah.
this last time there was I can't explain it. Even my daughter and I both felt it. She said, this place doesn't feel like America. She said, I
Yeah.
don't feel like I'm in America anymore. And even though there you are in the city where the nation was kind of born, in a way.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, of Philadelphia too, but just with the Freedom Trail and everything. And she said it's just kind of a dark feeling about everything. Everybody is it's just a very dark place now. And lots of the Steinway shop is boarded up, right in the theater district. There's certain places that were just fixtures. They were just always there,
Right.
and part of history, not just stores, but hotels and different things. They're either boarded up or shut down, to foot traffic. Like you can't come in. You can't even go
Yeah.
to a chain restaurant without a reservation. It's just it has a very closed, unfriendly feeling to it. Now, that's not to say I didn't meet individual people when
Oh,
I
of
was there who
course.
were very friendly,
Yeah.
of course, but the city as a whole did not feel at all like the kind of small, homey city that I remember. And even then, I wasn't a big fan of it. Might be
Right.
because I was a New Yorker. I don't know, but
But you could still go and you could have a nice
yes,
experience. You could enjoy the history, a
yeah,
play, maybe a baseball game or a sporting event.
a Mike's
But when they came
pastry.
when they started the lockdowns, it was amazing, and I was on the mistaken impression that there'd be, civil disobedience within 2 months, but
Same.
I kinda learned that they love the mask, and they're so fearful that these folks that Lexington, Massachusetts is even worse, even though it's more suburban and little even there's a few farms there,
Yeah,
um, but the people like the mask and they're afraid to get too close to anybody. And I said, this is going to be permanent. I said, I don't think this is going to, the people like this. They like the idea of being isolated. Uh, so again, we're glad we left. In fact, Michelle Wu is a big masker. She's probably going to have mandatory vaccines for everybody. And it's probably, the mask is probably going to stay indefinitely. And I would go around and not wear one. And I just said, look, I said, where's your mask? I said, I'm a free person. Sorry. I'm a free, and I don't have the virus. And they didn't like it, but too bad, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. And they're doing things like, even here in North Carolina, demanding that employers are now demanding that people tell them if they've been vaccinated. So they haven't yet started enforcing. They're about to. They haven't yet started enforcing the OSHA thing. But even my husband, who got the vaccine very early days before, he didn't even talk to me about it. He just kind of went off and got it because he's
Yeah.
had a heart condition, and his doctor
Yeah.
said you should do this. So he did.
Yeah.
And then as things got a little crazier and they started talking about mandates, um, he said, "Well, I'm not getting any boosters. I'm not doing anything. I got the first one, and if now you're telling me I need a booster, I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
But now they're saying, we need you to fill out this form and tell us what your status is." He said, "Why? You've not asked me about my heart attack. You didn't ask me about, like you don't have a right to my medical history. You don't have a right
Right.
to in exchange for my job. Like, am I doing the job? Are you happy with my job or not? But I shouldn't have to tell you this information." So he's kind of standing on firm on that. So even though he's like, I'm not telling them, it's not their business. He keeps ignoring the email. And so we're not sure what's going to happen if
Yeah.
they put their foot down and say, you need to tell us or else you're out. He said, fine, then I'm out. So
Then I'm
we're
out.
kind of,
Yeah.
and I'm not the only one. I know I have friends in North Carolina who are sort of, we're all biting our fingernails, wondering if by Christmas our spouses will be unemployed because they are taking a stand on this issue. And we're at that point. I think we were there before now, but we're at the point where each individual American, I think, has to decide, am I still an American? Do I
That's
still
right.
believe in the Bill of Rights? Do I still believe in individual liberty and that government's sole purpose is the preservation of that liberty?
That's
Or
correct. Yeah.
do I just want to be safe?
That's
Right.
right.
And it's not really safe. It's not safety.
It's not. Well, here in New Hampshire, the governor, who's sort of a moderate, sometimes he does good stuff and sometimes not so good, but he's not. In fact, I think our state's one of the states that is suing the Biden administration over it. It's awfully difficult. The Constitution gives the president no authority, and Biden knew that, or Biden's handlers knew that, because
Right.
Biden said there'll never be a mandate. He said that last year, not that long ago, and now
Right.
he's saying now he's mandating it. And it's interesting too. All these leftists, I'm never going to take this Trump vaccine, and then if you just like I say, just the same way Marty Walsh changed his view, they do this without even skipping a beat. Oh, you need to take that vax. It has to be done.
Right.
And I see these horrible commercials with little children in masks getting the vaccine, and it breaks my heart, to see these
Yeah.
commercials. I
Well,
said,
the
"What's wrong?"
population that least needs it, and well, anyway, I definitely don't want to go down that path too much because
That's
then
another topic. Yeah,
YouTube,
yeah.
well, YouTube will end up censoring the videos. We don't want
Oh,
that.
that's right too. Yeah. Oh, yeah,
You're not
yeah.
allowed to.
Oh, you can't
So,
discuss this. Yeah,
but yeah, and well, Sour Kiwi makes the point here that you've got Sununu up there playing both sides
yeah.
also with this issue. So, um, we didn't really plan to talk at all about the specifics of like the curriculum stuff that's going on in schools or reforming schools, but I did want to ask you, just because you are a homeschooling proponent, you did homeschool your own kids. Do you think this public schools can be reformed?
No, I don't think so. At
Okay.
least not in this generation. So and Sam Blumenfeld, when I first met him, he said it is a sin for a Christian to put your child in a government school. He would say that, and people would say, "Oh, you're a little bit too. That's a little too strong, Sam." But biblically, he's totally correct. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. There's no fear of the Lord in any of these government schools. So I am so grateful that I took his advice. And I say so jokingly. The only time my children set foot in a government school was when there was a church service being held at the church would rent out a room in the school. And when my girls had their dance recitals, they would do it in a Westwood High School in Massachusetts. That's the only time they actually set foot in the government school, but never there to learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
although my 17-year-old, we were up here in Alton, she runs track at the high school. She wanted to run track. She was a dancer. And so she doesn't. I don't think she's actually set foot inside the school, but she'll be. They have to do that. They have to extend these things to their. And of course, my philosophy is have no involvement whatsoever.
Right.
But I said, okay, and there, it's this school's not. It's the teachers, they tend to be a little on the conservative side, and the coaches, I like the coaches, so she's okay. And she just ended it last week, so that she's done with that. And she actually uses Liberty University's curriculum, and she just got accepted into Liberty. I have
Oh,
another
that
daughter who's
that
yeah,
answers
she's
this question.
yeah.
Is it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Did your children go to
Oh,
college? I worry
what?
about that stage for my child.
Yes. Well, my one of my daughters, she's 28 now. She went to a school in Providence, Rhode Island. They took everything, and then she transferred to Dean College, and then she did a graduate program at Boston College, so she did pretty good. I have a my 21-year-old. She's a senior at Liberty University School of Nursing, which is a very tough program, and she's going to be graduating in May. And then my son, who is more of a self learner, he's got a good head on his shoulders. I'm a little biased, of course. He's taken online courses at Liberty, and not sure. I kind of teach people. I said he wants to be a gunsmith. Where did I go wrong? He should have been a social worker. He wants to be a gunsmith. And my youngest is 17, and she just got accepted to Liberty University. So,
Okay.
and if you take these online accredited programs through the colleges, they give you big, deep discounts, for enrollment. And there's also, I want to plug this group called the Freedom Project Academy, run by
Okay.
Dr. Duke Pesta. He's a great guy out of Wisconsin. Freedom
Okay.
Project, Freedom Project Education or Freedom Project
Is this
University.
a university or is it a
It's an
homeschooling program?
online, fully accredited. It's K to 12, and they have great instructors. Alex Newman is one of them.
Okay.
You can see it. I think it's Freedom Project FPE dot
Yeah.
ed or Freedom Project Education.
It is. I'm going to put it in here too so people can see it.
They actually teach logic, and that's it right there. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Okay.
logic is something that's lost because most of the stuff these children are learning is not They don't think logically. It's all emotional, and I like learning the fallacies. We know sometimes when people are giving us a false narrative,
Hmm.
but the logic will explain this is why it's a false narrative, and I respond to people. So I write letters to editor, which I get, and I do a monthly column as well, and we do a blog. And some people will posit and I'd say you just articulated four logical fallacies
Oh, I
in
know.
your writing, and they get really angry with you. And then I say, well, that's ad hominem, they start calling you
Exactly.
names. That's ad hominem.
Exactly.
You can't refute an argument by calling me a name. That doesn't work. But it seems to work though today. You just call people enough names, or you're a
Mhm.
neo-Nazi, or you're a fascist. What's fascinating, we get since this flag case has come out, we get some leftists that don't like what we're doing, and they will actually call if we're going to be speaking at a certain place. They'll call the person who's running it or the venue. Oh, they're fascist, they're racist, they're this. And then they look at our website, and I tell people that we have more blacks, Hispanics, and Asians involved in our Camp Constitution that live in your town, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
that's so, that's sort of dismissed. So we haven't had too many problems. Although I was recently canceled from an event, and I was speaking to a group not too far from where I am. And then out of the blue, a week or so before the event, they canceled me. They won't tell me why, but I suspect this is what happened. But sometimes it works the opposite. They tried to do that in a little town in Maine, Appleton, Maine library. The
Right.
library said, we won't sponsor you, but you'll still hold the event. Well, we filled the place up because we caused controversy, So sometimes it works in our favor,
Right.
you know.
I think if somebody cancels you, they're probably doing you a favor.
That's right. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're probably saving you some time, because you don't really know who, when you're interacting with people, and they don't say anything, you don't know who might be picking up on it or not, and it just I think it just helps you narrow your focus and hone your own arguments when you see who is canceling.
Well, if we're
um
getting canceled, usually we get 3 or 4 other groups will say, "Hey, I just heard about you folks, and you can come to our group and speak." Or you
right.
we were canceled from a venue. It was an Episcopal church in Concord, New Hampshire. We were gonna rent it out, and we brought in legislators. We were gonna give them a free lunch and give them a presentation on a certain topic. And they said,
Right.
"Oh, no, no." The priestess said, "You're too conservative." And I said, I had fun with her. I said, "Do you believe in heaven?" She says, "Well, of course I do." Which, in Episcopal church, you get asked these days. I said, "Well, we're going to spend eternity in heaven. It's just too bad I can't spend a couple of hours using your venue here." And I walked out. It's your right to do that. I believe in
Right.
private property and all that. That we found a place that was free to us. Like an hour later, I said, "Oh, check this place out." It was
Yeah.
free, and it met our needs even better than that church did. So again,
Yeah.
sometimes the door's closed, but God opens a bigger one.
Now, this is a friend of mine and locals member, Patrick LaBelle. He is a professor, physics college professor in Canada. And he says, I wanted to post a note on a billboard explaining problems with the climate alarmism. The college suspended me. I am not making this up.
Yeah, I'm
Was
not
that
surprised.
recent, Patrick? They must have just recently done this, because we were talking with him about a month ago about things going on up there. And I'm pretty sure he was still, he wasn't suspended, but just for wanting to post a note on a billboard.
Yeah,
And I mean,
not surprised.
it's one thing I've said before on this channel that, especially if you're working for a state-run, and I don't know if his is, but if you're working for a state-run college or university, inside the classroom, last week he says this happened.
Let me recommend to him Professor Willie Soon. Willie is one of our instructors. He's an astrophysicist from Harvard University. He's not doesn't teach there. He just does research.
Okay.
But he's a regular at our camp, and if you go to our YouTube channel and put his name, and not only does he's funny. He puts it. He could be a comedian if he wasn't a full time scientist. But
Is
he and
this
his whole family.
Heartland? Is this Heartland
He's
Institute?
affiliated with Heartland Institute. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I'll
That's
just
where
put
I met him. I met him at a climate change conference in New York City, about 10 or 12 years ago. And we become good friends. He comes up here with his family to shoot. We have a range on our property. But I didn't talk too much about our summer camp, our family camps
No, I
going
know.
on.
We
Oh my,
start with the camp and we went zoom right into
oh
other
my
things.
goodness. Do
So,
we have any time for that?
of course, yes,
All right. Well,
absolutely.
anyway,
Please talk
we
about it.
run, in addition to all the things that we do, we run a week-long family camp. And next year's camp is it's in the here it is here. It's from July 17th to the 22nd. We're taking applications already. And what we do there is we have 3 classes in the morning. Before the classes, we have optional run and swim, flag racing. We teach the children and the campers the proper flag protocol. We do a Bible. We're non-denominational, but we would say Christian centered. But we don't have a particular denomination or a particular theological perspective. Other than rights come from that there is a God in heaven, that Jesus is the Lord and Savior, and that God rights come from God, not from government. So we have 3 classes in the morning. Then in the afternoon, we have various activities from marksmanship to hikes to field trips, swimming, hiking. We learn We have organized games like softball or wiffle ball games, even chess tournaments, all kinds of great things like that. And we have a special program for the youngsters. So the 5 to 11-year-olds, we call it Patriot Camp, where they learn our history. We have colonial outfits for them. We have little toy muskets. So they really learn a lot of history.
Mhm.
Um, and then the older students and the adults will usually take in the classes. And we have great instructors over the years. Alex Newman, Professor Willie Soon. We had Lord Christopher Monckton, a British lord, that would come to our camp. He couldn't come the last couple of years. And Pastor David Whitney of the Institute on the Constitution, and many other great instructors. And then in the afternoon, a few more classes, and then we have campfire. We have a camp newspaper and a field trip. So the historical venues over the years, we've been to the Bunker Hill Monument. We've been to the State House in Boston. We've been to the Capitol in Concord, New Hampshire, Lexington Green, Concord Bridge. This year we went to the Calvin Coolidge Homestead, which is not too far from the camp, and beautiful place in Plymouth, Vermont. So go to our
Like
website.
I want to go.
You,
I want
we'd
to go.
love to have you. We'd
I
love to
want
have
to
you.
go.
We
It
have
sounds like a
people
lot
as
of
far
fun.
as we have people as far as California and Florida that come every year. They drive up, they fly from Cal, but drive up from Florida with their whole families. And the tuition
Wow.
is very reasonable. And we're a nonprofit charitable trust, so we get a family of 7 or 8, and it could be a lot of money. I say put in what you can, and we'll cover the rest. So we have people who donate for the purpose of getting people this great camp experience. So,
So, and then
and
I
last year
see
we
that
filled up. Oh,
your
this year we
contact
filled.
person is here in Charlotte.
Yes, yeah, Mr. Charlie Everett. Yeah, Charlie used to live in New Hampshire, and he's
Okay.
he's one of the co-founders. There's the other
Okay.
co-founder is from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Mrs. Ruth Harper, another retired school teacher,
Uh-huh.
and she drives with her van every year. She drives from Grand Rapids to New Hampshire to
Hmm.
help us in the camp. So we also have ladies events. We use the term advance. Instead of a retreat, we're not a retreating, we're advancing. And my wife's very gifted crafter, and so they'll have some Bible devotions, and they just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. They had Mrs. Polly Heath, who's a Christian performer, singer, and they get a good study on Abigail and John Adams. That was sort of the theme. They
Oh,
had a lot of fun.
wow.
And we're going to be hopefully pretty soon. We're going to be having a weekend family camp as well in the fall. Maybe hopefully next year we'll book it. We got so many camps right around my area, and I'm looking at this beautiful. The place we use, by the way, is Singing Hills in Plainfield, which is just a little south of Lebanon, New Hampshire, about an hour drive from Concord, the state capital, and not too far from the Vermont border. And it's a great place for activities there as well. So
It just looks beautiful. And I mean, just the array of activities alone,
it's we have a professional juggler and a mime. He studied under, is it Marcel Marseille? Is that the famous
I think
mime?
it's Marcel Marceau. Marcel
That's it.
Marceau.
He studied under
Yeah.
him, and he brings his son. And I met him at a homeschool show, and he
Yeah.
brings his popcorn machine, his cotton candy machine, and he dresses up as Uncle Sam on stilts. And we have a gentleman that brings his cannons. He made his colonial era cannons, and so we learned the proper a little bit. We can actually fire them on the camp. We do. And we have some inner city people have never fired a weapon before. So we have certified instructors that teach them the fine arts of marksmanship. So,
Wow.
a
And
lot of
this
good
is
stuff.
and this would be I mean, it's appropriate for all ages, right?
All ages, yes. And
All
we do
ages.
encourage whole families to come, although
Right.
sometimes it's just their children. But
Yeah.
I think this year we only had 11 unaccompanied minors. All the
Yeah.
other people, we had over 150 people.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking like I would absolutely love to do this. This is like, the summer camp I wish I'd gone to but never got to. I went
I've
to
got
summer
to.
camp and I did have a great time at summer camp. I went in Lake Placid to a place called
Oh yes.
Treetops. And
Okay.
I loved it because there was a lot of hiking. So
Yeah.
we did hiking and farming. And so we grew our own vegetables and we took care of animals. And so there were a
Oh,
lot
okay.
of things. It was a working farm as well as a camp and lots of arts and crafts and things. So I loved it. But of course, it over the years has gotten more and more and more and more woke. And as a consequence, also more and more and more expensive. It's massively expensive. It's like
Wow.
almost as expensive as going to a year of private school. And
Well, we
so,
we
yeah, there's
charge
no way.
300 for 14 and older adults. 14 and older, it's 300 for everything. That's
Right.
lodging, meals, materials. The only thing we don't, we have a camp picture, which you'll see on our website. We
Uh-huh.
just charge a few bucks for that. We have a camp bookstore. Uh, for those under 13 and under, it's $200. And again, we do make, and children under 3 are free, of course. And
Right.
we do have tuition assistance available on sort of a case by case basis. But
Sure.
I think there was only once that we had to say no to a family because it was the day before camp and we were already full.
Right.
We already the camp only, and we don't want the camp to be too big because then it kind of loses its intimacy. You want to
Sure.
make sure you get to know as many people as you can, and
Sure.
so we don't. I think 150 is probably good to cap it at that.
Right. Right. But it really sounds like a great opportunity, and especially for people who are homeschooling, right? I mean, it's not all homeschoolers, but there are
No, but
probably
we
a
do have,
fair
I would say
number.
over half. I would say over half our attendees are homeschooling families. And a
Mhm.
lot of these people are friends for life. That's one of the important things as a parent is to make sure your children have good company, good friends,
Yeah,
the right friends. And because that what one bad decision can ruin a life for good,
that's so
whatever that,
true.
that bad
And
decision is.
that's the socialization piece. When people say to me,
That's right.
aren't you worried about that? I'm like, yes, I'm very worried about it, which is why I love homeschooling
One
because
one of the things we do is we take the cell phones from them when they get to camp. Now they can call back, they can call mommy and daddy, and in most cases, mommy and daddy are already there.
yeah,
So it's not we keep them and say you want to call, but they're not walking around with cell phones. They're not twittering and twattering and texting. And after a couple like a day, they get the delirium tremors, after a day without the cell phone. But then they start talking to each other. Now these are the ones
yeah,
who are new to camp, and they organize their own games, and with the little ones, they're playing cowboys. Can you imagine they were playing cowboys and Indians at our camp? Oh my goodness, how horrible that
I
is,
think that's not politically correct. We're not
That's
allowed to
well,
do that.
and the parents love it. We had more parents come up to us. Um, they tell us that this camp far exceeded their expectations. Not just, oh, this was pretty good, but far exceeded. We like that term, far exceeded. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
we
that's
had a
awesome.
couple. The couple came with their two sons, and they have a fitness. They became our camp sponsor. Which, by the way, we encourage anyone who participates in our camp or helps out in any way becomes a sponsor. So we'd love to put your link if we could to on our website, our
Oh yeah,
sponsors page, because in fact you had me on here, your sponsor, you helped me with Camp Constitution Mission, you're a sponsor.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have plans to do more than that. We're going to talk after this show's over. I have
Okay.
bigger plans for
O-
you.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is just fabulous. And I want people to understand too, and I'm going to put the link to the specific section of it then
On the
when you get
archive.
yeah, I'm going to put
Yeah.
the specific link because those of you in the audience who are homeschooling or thinking about homeschooling, I want you to have this link I just put in the chat to the to the archives, the Sam Blumenfeld archives. What you will find in there, it is free, you're just going to put your email address and so forth, is that you will find a treasure trove. It is unbelievable the wealth of information that's in there. And it's almost like a course, like a college level course, and everything you'd ever want to know about home education, about reading, about all of it. Just it's all in there. You really need to have this as one of your bookmarks because you may not it might overwhelm you day one, but then you might, if you just browse the titles of things, you might say, oh, you know what, there's something in the archive, I'm going to go check that out. And I think especially new homeschooling families need that. You need sort of an encyclopedia of of ideas and thoughts, and even just a why. Even once I got going with homeschool, they're going to be rough days. They're going to
Hmm.
be rough days because parenting is rough. Parenting has highs and lows, and there are trials and tribulations. And so you need to get reacquainted with your why. I've met a lot of parents who will homeschool for elementary, and then they'll think because they start having teenagers or prepubescent kids, or like rebel whatever, and they think, well, maybe they need to go to school, maybe that's the thing. And I have to kind of counsel them and say, nope, push through.
Absolutely not.
This is absolutely the time you don't want to do that, because first of all, that rebellion is completely natural. It's age appropriate. It's hormonally driven in many cases. And this is the time. This and the teenage years are when they need you the most. And of
No.
course, if
Yeah.
my children overhear me saying this, they're going to say, Mom, you're a big hypocrite because you're so busy making videos and talking to everybody else about homeschooling, and we never get to see you. And I just got that this morning. I was busy promoting the show, and I'm sitting there, I'm trying to eat my breakfast, and I'm promoting the show, and I look up, and my daughter is videotaping me, or videotaping,
Oh,
but she's sitting
oh,
there with her phone like this. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I want you to see what you look like when you're so busy and you're doing this." And of course, it broke my heart, and I got annoyed with her, and I
yeah,
really have to go apologize because I said, "I'm
yeah, yeah,
trying to work and do these things," and she says, "But
yeah,
you're busy."
yeah. Well,
So
when we
that
were
happens.
homeschooling, when we started homeschooling, like you say, we had our bad days, and is this the right thing? In those days we had cassettes. You remember those things?
Yeah.
I'd pop in a cassette of Sam Blumenfeld speaking, and after about 5 minutes, says, "Why was I even giving it a second thought?"
Thank you. That's what
So
I'm telling people. Is like you will get inside your head, and then of course you'll have your mother-in-law or your best friend down the
yeah,
street or
yeah,
something like that, and they'll be like, "I don't understand why you don't just put them in school, and they're gonna be
yeah,
weird," and you get an
yeah, yeah,
earful, and
yeah.
that's when you need to go to Sam and you need to sit there and be like, "Oh yes, I'm doing the right thing." It's
The
not
archive
supposed
has
to be peachy keen easy every minute of every day, and it's not going to be any easier if they go to school.
the archives contain about 2 weeks worth of his speeches, audio and video. And
Mm.
what I do every week, I have to do, I get it. I have an article called the Weekly Sam, and I usually focus an article, either a video or an audio, or maybe one of his newsletters or something he's written,
Yeah.
and you just present that. So, and one of the things we just put back in print too, it was his newsletter. I wish I had it at my fingertips here. It was his newsletter. I think it was June of 1986. So if you can, it was called the Eugenics in America and the Creation of a Black Underclass.
Yep.
And that is a timeless information. It goes into the
Yep.
IQ test, the racially motivated. The whole reason for these IQ tests was to prove that blacks were inferior
Mhm.
academically, intellectually. That was the main reason for these things. And most people don't know that. And when they discovered that American Indians have quicker reflexes than blacks or whites, well, they said that proves how inferior. If you a quicker reflex to something, that means you're inferior intellectually. What? That has nothing to do with intellect, you know.
No. No.
So we put it back in print. We just put the order into the printer. You can download it free of charge, but we have to get this in the hands of some folks. There's a friend of mine, Dr. Felicia Nace, another great guest for you.
Okay.
She authored a book called Top Down Gender Confusion, and she's
Okay.
working on a book on the Wayne Williams case, the murder case. The book's be out in the spring, and
Okay.
she asked me to write the foreword to it. But she also said, "Can we reprint that newsletter?" And I think it's June 1986, Sam Blumenfeld Education Letter. And I said, "By all means." And I thought, you know what, we need to reprint this too. And so we did. And there's some timeless newsletters in there too. Some great stuff in there.
But do you
I
think
think
that at this point, I mean, we know what the how the IQ tests were misused, right? But do you think that we've gone like all the way the other side and we've thrown it out, like we've thrown it all out when sometimes a certain degree of, um, there's some relevance in terms of just studying the data as far as the IQ test, not for drawing conclusions about
right,
large groups of people, but to
right.
better understand an individual that's sitting right in front of you as far as their cognitive talents and so forth. And I say that only because I
Oh,
was struggling. Okay.
I'm not against testing. In fact, even at our camp, we sometimes have a final exam, and
Okay.
because it scares people, and we don't tell them that it's not a question of. And I do believe, I believe in the grade structure, and yeah, there are some people who do better than others, and
Hmm.
it doesn't bother me that I didn't get on the honor roll every time when I was in school. I tried,
Right.
I got good grades, and it was
Right.
always smarter people who did better,
Right.
but everyone has their little. I mean, I look at God-given talents. That's how Christians look at things.
Right.
If I was born a genius, I better use that genius to advance God's kingdom. Or
Right.
and I tell people that I know some extremely talented people. I said, "What are you doing with your talent? If you're an artist, what are you doing to advance the kingdom?" Well,
Mhm.
I have a friend who's a great cartoonist. He won't do anything. I give him some ideas, but he can't do. I have a friend who's a gifted writer. He doesn't write.
Right.
And I thought, that's a shame. I said, "I
Right.
wish I could write like you."
Well,
So
and the thing is too that people who assume that just because you have a high IQ, measured through testing or whatever, or just because you have all kinds of talents, that means you're going to be successful. You have some leg up. That's a snapshot fallacy. It assumes that
yeah,
where you are is where you're going to stay. It assumes that you have the psychological and character traits to make use of those talents. There's a lot more to a person than just their cognitive ability. In
That's
fact,
right.
that
That's
would be
right.
like saying, I'm going to test my muscle strength and oh, well, I'm done. I don't have
Right.
a lot. I can't sprint. I guess
Yeah.
I'm through. No,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
one other measure that I think we've attached way too much status to being smart in that cognitive sense, when in fact there are a lot of other hurdles that, for example, that profoundly gifted kids have to jump through. It's you can be what we call like twice exceptional, like you're profoundly gifted, but you have some other challenges. It's not a given,
That's right.
and we need to. So it was misused, it was misapplied, in my opinion. But I think that people like Charles Murray get a bad rap, and they're like attacking him like you're a racist because you actually look
Right.
at data. And he's like, no, I'm just trying to show you what the data shows. There it is.
That's
Bye.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
do with it
Yeah.
what you will. And I say that
Well, the
because I was.
data shows that Asians tend to be much better in many things. That
Mhm.
doesn't. I'm okay with that. I'm not offended by it. So if your
Right.
group is I mean, that,
Right.
and it happens to be true. I mean, if it's true, it's true. It's you can't.
Exactly.
And that, I guess, am I a racist because I point out that Asians tend to do better in certain tests? No, I
Right.
think it's just a fact.
Right. And it doesn't mean that they will be successful. So
No, it
like there's
doesn't.
a whole success, first of all, is subjective and it depends on the individual, and there's a lot of other factors, but it's not a guarantee. None of this is a guarantee. It just means you will be successful at the things that are like the test.
I
That's
have some.
about what it means.
I call the Kolya Yastrzemski analogy. Now, Kolya Yastrzemski was a baseball player, Hall of Famer, and he didn't have the highest average. He didn't, but he had the most at bats than anybody that ever played the game. And they
Right.
said, well, how do you get all those hits if his average was only like 280? Because he had the most at bats. In other
Right.
words, you can't be successful unless you get to the plate and take some swings, whether that be
Yep.
at a baseball game or whether that be in other venues. And I mean, if you can't be a successful business person unless you start a business, you know,
Exactly.
and
You have to try.
so if you don't do it, I mean, there are some people that said, "Hell, you don't want to start this." No, no, don't start this camp program. I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take a leap of faith. And then when I was given an option to leave a job, I won't go into that detail. I said, I can't work for these people anymore. I'm going to see a Camp Constitution full time. Oh, that will never happen. But it did, because that's where I think God wants me to be, and that's why we're having success. And this Christian flag lawsuit, it was never my idea to have a lawsuit to go to the Supreme Court. It sort of happened. And so I said, God's hand is in this. And our camp chaplain, Reverend Stevie Crabb, you find his videos. He's a dynamic guy, wonderful guy, and very motivational too. And he said, Hallie, I know we win this thing. He said, because God's in this. I said, I'm not arguing about that. Not that I started arguing about it. And, he said, when
Well, and
God's
I
in,
mean, if you don't, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not or whatever. It's just
yeah,
we don't know what. Like I said, you win either way because
that's right.
you're going to point out something important to people, and that might have more of an impact than if you got the flag raised.
What's
So
interesting too is the Supreme Court gets about 8,000 cases every year delivered to their doorstep. They only
yeah,
take about 80.
and they
So
took
like
yours.
less than 1%. So if we look at percentages and chances, we're not going to win the lottery that way.
Right, right, right.
But
That's
God's hand is in this, and it's a great First Amendment issue too.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. There's a lot of things that'll be interesting to see as far as the Supreme Court, because even some of these other mandates and issues, and a lot of people don't
Vaccine mandate.
understand that the Constitution, as fabulous as it is, doesn't doesn't prevent Congress from making dumb laws.
That's
All
right.
it looks at is does Congress have the power to make this law? And then that's what the Constitution has. And if it's not there, if it's not precluded, right, then they might go make a really dumb law, and then you have to test that out, obviously, in the Supreme Court if you disagree
Well,
with it.
the
That's about, or replace the
Constitution
Congress. That's it.
Well, the Constitution grants so many powers and duties to each branch. The Supreme Court they talk about balance. The Supreme Court was never supposed to be as powerful as it become. The executive branch the president isn't supposed to be the most powerful person in the free world. That's not the job description.
Right.
Congress has specific duties, most of them spelled out in Article 1, Section 8, and they use this thing called the elastic clause.
Uh-huh.
That's one that gives them blanket power. No, they're supposed to carry out what's necessary and proper in
Right.
pursuance of the Constitution. So if they make a law that says you have to have medical insurance, that's not in pursuance of the Constitution. That they pass a law that says we have to give foreign aid to a particular country, that's not in the Constitution. Or we have to fund schools around the country, that's unconstitutional. In
Right.
fact, I found that libraries are great places to find old books that they're tossing out, good old stuff. I found a book in a Medway, Massachusetts, at one of these library sales, 50 cents. It was published by the U.S. Printing Office in 1941. It was called "The Formation of the Union Under the Constitution," and it was a New Deal Congress and Franklin Roosevelt. And in the book, there is a question and answers, and they asked the question, what role does the federal government have in education? And you know what? I tell people this New Deal leftist socialist Democrat Party had complete control of Congress and that White House. Guess how they answered that question? The answer was none. So, and I think we have that book in a PDF version on our website where it says the downloads, you click it, and it's phenomenal. And they were right. They have no. So what's happened since 1941? Has there been an amendment that said the federal government now has control of education? No.
No.
They just people forgot. And state governments, they love taking federal money. We don't. We take federal money. We don't have to, raise our taxes, and we look good. We're going to have more services we're giving to voters, or what have you.
Yeah. Worst thing. I mean, the biggest mistake, in my opinion, from the first Reagan administration was he didn't undo what Carter did.
Well, he was supposed to abolish the Department of Education.
Yeah, and he didn't. And I think he wrote about it later that was a mistake, but.
And I liked a lot of things that Trump did, and Trump, instead of abolishing it, he had Betsy DeVos, and I don't care who's running it. If it's unconstitutional, I don't care if you have a conservative running a bad entity. I don't care. It should be abolished.
Right.
I used to talk to Sam, and I'd say, Sam, what would you do if you were head of the Department of Education? He said, I'd get up an auction mallet. He said, I would auction off all of the hard assets, and then I would resign. And that would be the end of that. Fire everybody and then resign, and that will be the end of that. He'd abolish it. And that's what it should be abolished.
It should. That next incoming president, if they are remotely conservative, needs to just put an end to our misery, because you can take 1979 and a chart of our, reading ability and everything, and it's just like, phew, like you just threw a rock off.
Same thing with the Department of Energy. You look at since they've been around, we've become less and more dependent upon other nations for our energy. They don't produce 1 kilowatt of energy, but they do a lot to make it difficult to produce energy here.
Right, exactly. Well, gosh, Hal, I could probably talk to you like all day long, but I'm sure we could. Other things to do. I'm so excited. This was great. I'm so glad that you reached out to me and we got to meet. I want to show people before we go. I'm going to share screen and I'm going to show them the sort of the dashboard of the camp.
The website. Okay.
Yeah. Specifically, I want to show. Let's see where it's at. I want to show the. Where is it? Oh, I have to. Why is it not letting me see things? It's not letting me show that screen. I'm going to have to figure out how to show the screen. But I want you guys to go and sign up for the camp, or sign up for the archives at this link, campconstitution.net. And then when you do, click the Sam Blumenfeld archives. I'm so frustrated. I can't just show it because usually it's a new computer. I just set this up.
You're not familiar with some of them.
And so I've got to be able to show it. You know what I'm gonna do? I'll do it here. So anyway, that's what I want people to do. But I think .net. Okay, if I pull it up in here, I think I can get to it better. Because this resource is insanely good. I'm just blown away by it. All right. I think it's going to take too long to get to it. Yeah, it's going to take too long. All right. I will make sure that I put a screenshot of this out of my locals in the public area so you guys can see the screenshot. And then watch this video, log in, and you will see it. And please share this with people who missed it. so more people can see it. The replay will be up immediately. You may not be able to see it in the main page of my YouTube videos though, because for some reason YouTube will like hide it. But if you go to the promos in my social media, you can click on those links and find it. But do look under the live videos and it should be there. The chat will not until tomorrow. The chat will not be there until tomorrow.
You're welcome to download and reprint anything that's on there. We don't ration bullets in time of war. These are educational bullets, so please. Like we let this lady in South Africa. She's going to be starting a number of satellites, and I said you can have you have total exclusive use. I'm not exclusive, but total use. Just tell people where it came from. That's all. That's all we
Yeah.
ask.
I love that we do not ration bullets in time
Bullets
of
in
war.
wartime. Yep. Yep.
That's fantastic. All right. Thank you so much,
Thank
everybody,
you.
for coming.
Thank
Please
you for
share
having
the
me on.
information. You are so welcome. Thank you for coming. See you
All right.
later,
God
guys.
bless.